let's look that up
Yeah.
real quick
Yeah,
because
let's Google it together.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna start this off now. So we already talked for a while, but Jerome Ortmann,
Yes.
welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, happy. Thanks for taking the time. And I thought we'd start with just a basic question of how you got into the games industry. I saw you have a long career before that as well.
Yeah, I wasn't always working in games. I've always been a gamer. That's one thing. Since I was 5, close to 5. Mom brought home a Game Boy. Mom was very young at the time, 24. So, started playing Tetris. I looked over her shoulder, and a few days later, that Game Boy was mine. She had to buy herself a new one, you know? Like, so the story goes. But actually working in games, I come originally from like a PR background. I've worked in agencies and for tech companies in both PR, digital marketing, which I was lucky at the time was brand new and I was curious. So I jumped into social media and tried to understand how that stuff actually works instead of just posting cat pictures, at the time. So started working in digital marketing for a while, learned sort of the ropes when it comes to like advertising and these kind of things. And then, because of a woman I met, moved to Sweden after finishing, studies and work and all that stuff in Germany. Originally, I'm from Germany. And worked at a tech company here in Sweden and got fired because I wrote an angry email.
Sweden?
In Sweden,
wow.
yeah. So
must have been really angry.
yeah. Swedish culture is interesting if you're German. And I learned that the hard way and, have always been good since, more tactful. But I was unemployed for a little while in Sweden, like a good 10 months just looking around for jobs, and did apply to a lot of gaming companies because of both my background and I always wanted to work in games, and especially Stockholm is a great hub for game companies, right? Like I was looking into producer roles like junior producer, associate, all that stuff. And then Ubisoft started a studio in Stockholm. And they were just like really, 49 employees. I ended up being employee number 50. Jumping in there as a communication specialist, whatever that meant at the time. So really they didn't have much going on, but they just wanted someone to help out with like studio communications, all that stuff, and building bridges between them and the other studios, because Ubisoft Stockholm was working a lot with Massive down in Malmö. So the Division 2, Avatar, these kind of released games, and other stuff. Unfortunately for me, after a while, my role became redundant because Ubisoft was looking at like the overall org, as companies do every now and again. So I've been through all of that. And they were like, why do we have this guy there? It doesn't make any sense. And so I had to move on. And then I got really lucky because the stars just aligned, and basically a few days later I had a job interview at Avalanche for a communications manager, and that was the real move into working with games actively. I would say that my time at Ubisoft was more about learning how a video game company works from the inside, but not actively working on a lot of stuff. And then Avalanche was like actively working on products, working with the dev teams, working with producers, release managers, like learning all of that stuff, and had a great time there. Got promoted twice, I think, back in the day. And I've been in the industry ever since. Moved on to Fatshark, worked on the Warhammer titles there, Vermintide 2 and Darktide. And then once Darktide was launched, I kind of felt I want to work for a company that just has more titles in their portfolio, because I like to, just occupy my mind with different things, different projects, also creatively speaking, just working on different types of games. And I guess, what I do, starting out in communications, where I'm at now, I'm a senior brand and marketing director. So I have gone through sort of like everything you do on the sort of external communications and marketing side, and package that into what my role is now. It goes beyond pure marketing at Saber, where I'm at now. I look at early game pitches, concepts, evaluate those from a brand perspective, but also player perspective. I work closely with things like localization and ratings and all that stuff as well. So we try to help out everywhere. So you could actually say that technically I work more in publishing than just pure marketing, even though my job title is very much, yes, I look after bringing our games to market. So like the strategy and the planning and working with all the different teams to get buy-in, trailers, key arts, basically everything that you see when you open up Google and you Google a game title and stuff pops up. We have a hand in, myself and my team of brand managers, my boss, of course, and then the extended publishing team. And you work with a lot of parties all over the place, stakeholders, the CEO of Saber, COO of Saber, the game directors of the different games, because Saber is a actually pretty big company, which many people probably are not aware of when they just hear the name. Think about that one game, Space Marine, or they think about World War Z. But, we've just announced Hellraiser. We announced Turok at the Game Awards. We have a game coming out called The Nightling, small action adventure later in August. And lots of unannounced stuff. And lots of people work at Saber. We have several studios, and you have several personalities and game directors and developers and everybody that you work with and try to make shit happen. So yeah, that long story short, now in games for, what is it now, 7-8 years, but built on a previous career in sort of marketing and communications, working with other companies outside of the games industry, banks, car rental companies, Coca-Cola. Can we name Coca-Cola?
I don't know. I think we can say anything we want. I was thinking for a while.
Soft drink company.
Yeah. Well known. Much marketed. Yeah. Yeah. No, but I was contemplating whether or not it would be like a cast where you could swear and stuff like that. And so it's like, no, anything goes. It's just
anything goes. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're not taking money from anyone, so we should be able to say whatever we want.
We should be. Yeah.
But so you sort of touched on it, but how do you describe your role in the creative process of making a game or making and shipping a game, I guess?
Yeah. It depends on when you jump into a project, but I work with titles that are, basically not even sort of in pre-production yet. And of course with titles that are now in alpha and, 12 months to release or whatever, if things go well. But in general, what we do is we sit down with the developers and the creatives that have creative in their job title, so to speak. Yeah. Creative director of a game, and we really try to understand what it is that they're actually trying to do. Then in the first instance, as part of publishing, you also end up giving feedback on some of that stuff, like the concept itself. Is this sound? Does it make sense? Is it competitive in a way? Or is it just, a reskin of something that already exists, which can work. But what is the new stuff that just kind of is being brought to the table? We need to find that in marketing, because that is kind of like our hook, right? What we use to actually make the game interesting to people that hopefully end up buying it, wishlisting it or whatever. So as part of that is sort of like the first sort of touch point where you start working creatively, start to think about things, how to lift something that on paper maybe sounds like just another shooter or just another horror game or whatever it is, so that's really where things kick off. And then you start to work on the brand itself, the tone, things like that, together with the game directors who, are busy, have a game to direct and a game to make. So in most cases, you're kind of being left to your own devices. In other cases, it can be a bit more difficult, but that is also because, you know, creative individuals, and I would count myself and most people I know in this industry as creative individuals, no matter what they do, they can be very protective of ideas, right? And that's where, you know, sometimes working in a creative field is more a politics game and like learning how to talk to people than it is actually executing on an idea, right? So it's a bit of everything. It really boils down to communication, the gig itself. From a creative side, we work with a lot of partners, of course, to do the execution. My job is often to direct and facilitate. So if there are any roadblocks or problems, I try to solve them with my team. And when it comes to directing, I tend to be more in a feedback giving position these days than an actual execution side of things. I don't write as much anymore, I edit. So kind of moved into sort of the oversight role and try to enable others to do their job. Yeah, that's it.
So how would you, I don't know if this is like a devil's advocate question or just downright rude, but, you know, I mean, obviously as a not directly creator or creative person, I mean, obviously you don't want to stifle creativity, but how do you think you, well, amplify or contribute to the actual creativity? I mean, this is a very hard to define field, I guess, but if you understand what I'm trying to.
Yeah, it's I think it comes down to how you also view the creative process, right? What I touched upon now is like sometimes you meet someone and they're like, I have an idea, and they are very protective of that idea and they want to just push that idea through. My thought process is more that ultimately, talking about collaboration, even when you come up with something by yourself, while you run, while you take a shower, while you take a walk, a game concept, even if you just create this by yourself, you are instantly collaborating with everything that has come before. Every idea that you've ever seen, heard, consumed is a collaboration. So looking at it from that standpoint, I try to truly understand, what are the inspirations here for that concept, for that person, and try to find a way into that. Sometimes it doesn't work at all. That's more of an ego thing. Like, I think in this industry, ego is the enemy. And it's something that I had to learn as well when I was young, started interning, I wanted to contribute. And I thought contribution means I have to bring this idea to the table and it has to be that idea, right? When contribution is actually, as I see it more, active listening, for example, and trying to understand, ask questions. And through asking questions, you can actually influence people to get to a different place as well. It's like, not a question like, do you really think this is a good idea? To piss them off, but more like, what makes you want to pursue that route? What was the inspiration here? What makes you think this will work with players? Things like that. To kind of like stimulate their own thought process more. And through that, you end up finding a compromise more often than not, which is a nice place to be and what I consider a success. And it goes the other way around as well with ideas that we have in marketing. So we just announced Hellraiser. It was a big announce, very well received. You go through a process that can last over a year, right? Like from making the trailer with a trailer house, giving feedback there, to talking to the game director, to the creative people, to the studio, how they want to have everything represented. And Hellraiser being a very cherished IP, you talk to the licensor, the IP holders. So a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And if you just barge in as a marketing person and say, we have to do it this way, it has to be, like, I don't know, safe for work or whatever, which is the opposite of what we did.
I
then,
didn't see the trailer.
Yeah. So it's like, we actually are very excited about this one because we can go further, break some boundaries, and push the limits a little bit. But yeah, I think overall, you know, like collaboration, communication, just understanding what these things mean more so than just taking the word and running with it. Especially collaboration. Collaboration to me is not your idea has to convince everybody else, or everybody else has to be convinced of your idea, right? It's coming to a point where everybody is kind of okay with some of the losses, you know, losing a piece of their original idea and thoughts, losing maybe a piece of their heart and letting somebody else's also in, for the benefit of the product and ultimately for the business. Because the thing about the video game industry is, like, I mean, it is creative. It's commercialized creativity in a way. Like, we don't like to talk about it that way, because especially young people, they go in and they're like, I can do whatever I want. The you know, this world is my oyster. But as we see time and time again, with changes in the industry and, you know, unfortunate reality of layoffs and all that stuff, there are people that are in this to make profit, and oftentimes we work for them. So whether we want to or not, right?
Yeah.
If you don't want to, as a creative, there are many ways to do your own thing. And ultimately, as shitty as that sounds, that opportunity exists, and it has existed for centuries. Painters, you know, I mean, Michelangelo probably made a lot of money on the side, you know, painting the Sistine Chapel and all that stuff, because that was a paid gig ultimately. But there were many artists like Van Gogh who never made a dime, and still did kick-ass work. They just didn't live to see it be loved down the line.
No, of course. I mean, if you're fine with, or if you're dead set on being non-commercial, then you can. But it's just hard to.
Yeah, and it's guardrails, right? Like when you work with a licensed IP, which actually Saber is doing a lot of. You always have those guardrails and restrictions that you work within. It doesn't mean that you can't be creative inside of them. It just means that you have to recognize the limitations and then work within. And I do think that exists everywhere. When you're an artist or a marketing person working for a smaller studio that makes their own IP, their own game, somebody there set up those guardrails. You know, if you make a action adventure open world where, you know, you slide on a shield like the Nightling, you don't have a sword. There's no combat in that sense. You can't just barge in and say like, hey, we need swords here. You know, that's not how the thing works. You work with your limitations. You're like, okay, shield sliding, that's pretty cool. What can we do here that's fun? You know, show some of that off in the trailer. You know, that sort of stuff. What can we do with a tagline for the game? Like we came up with slide into adventure. Not bad at all. Kind of like on point. Yeah. But that tagline only exists because there were the guardrails that we were given, right? I think when it comes to creativity and collaboration, this is where you land. Like you find your little bubble, and within that bubble, you have conversations and you build something that ultimately everybody's happy with. And hopefully, people like it too. That's the last thing you can influence. You never really know until it's live. So true,
very true. Regardless of how many wish lists you have, it's
yeah. These metrics, they can tell a wrong story as well. You know.
True. So, can you remember the first time that you were part of a team where creative collaboration was played a major role? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, the first time was definitely outside of games when I started out as an intern at a PR agency. You know, it was the first time that I was part of a professional brainstorm. You know, they sit you down. They're like, okay, here are the rules. Again, guardrails, right? One of my favorite rules for brainstorms that I took from that was no negatives. So everybody can just say what they want. You don't just shut it down. You know, like, oh, we don't have money for that. Oh, that's silly. You know, like, I mean, and I think whenever you are in a brainstorm, you find those people that immediately will hold themselves back as well. Like, I have an idea, but I know we don't have the money. I know we can't do this. I know we can't, but you know. And I think it's more effective for people to just riff and just say things, right? And this is something I learned there, and took with me as well. So when working in games, the first time, you know, I really got exposed to sort of building out these marketing plans, these communication campaigns together with a game team was when I started out at Avalanche. Also a very inclusive company to this day, where just the way that they are set up makes it easier for people to contribute, because it feels like a very safe space working at that company. And I think, you know, especially men have a tendency to just barge in and say things and like, this is what it is, this is the idea. So the culture itself has to also allow for an environment where people don't necessarily take over all the time. I think one thing I learned at Avalanche was pretty lucky for me that it is such an inclusive company in that sense, was that everybody can bring things to the table. You know, QA sometimes, especially QA, because they play certain titles, you know, more than anybody else, thousands of hours, because they need to find all the stuff that doesn't work, right? Talk to QA, you know, you might find really, really good insight there. And this is something I learned there, that like, you know, of course ideas are cheap, everybody has them, but at the same time it is definitely worth to listen to people who have been spending time with a product or just have a certain area of knowledge that could be helpful down the line.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think you touched on this a couple of times, but just like, what does creative collaboration mean to you? And especially perhaps not being a traditional creative, if you want to, know, designer, artist, those kind of roles.
I think ultimately it comes down to, you know, let's say you sit in a room with people, you talk about a game for the first time or the second time even, like, hey, here's the concept, here's the game design document, whatever, like everybody's seen it. How do we bring this to market, right? And I think ultimately there are a lot of different skills that go into sort of the professional way of being creative, right? I mean, I can, you know, have a morning with my kids where my son holds up a tractor and calls it a fire truck. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Now it's a fire truck. You know, like, you go, be creative, do your thing. And it's the most wonderful thing. It just doesn't work in a professional environment, because I can't go and like, you know, your game is not an action adventure. It's actually whatever, you know, a walking sim. You know, actually, when you look at Death Stranding 2, kind of like, what is this game? Is it an action adventure? Is it just, you know, I'm just walking around? Is it a delivery game?
Genre breaking.
Yeah, yeah. And it's excellent. It's a fun mix of many things. But ultimately, collaboration, again, to me means active listening and finding, you know, maybe a path into people's sometimes rigid way of looking at the world, at their world that oftentimes they create. So, of course, it's like you talk to God. You try to convince God that they need to change their mind about something. It's not always easy. It can be frustrating. You can come out of a meeting and be like, oh, this didn't do anything. We didn't change anything. I need to maybe talk to somebody else. I need to get some help and convince that person. And you don't want to be in those situations, but, you know, sometimes you end up in those situations. But the way I look at it is like, there's this Japanese concept of pottery called kintsugi. I hope I pronounce it right. Whatever. Yeah. Kintsugi, I think. So they break a pot, and then they put it back together with like gold sort of elements. So it looks really pretty. It's like something that broke, fell apart, and now here's this new pot sort of pieced together with like little elements of gold. And I think the way I look at creative collaboration, whether that's a marketing idea or like a game director's idea of how to market a game, that's ideally the process. You take things, tear them to pieces, you break them apart, and then through the collaboration, ultimately come up with this like gold infused pretty pot. And then you have something. Everybody sort of feels like, okay, now we're onto something. And it might, still change over time or whatever, but you set a good foundation for collaboration. And it's also like, you let other people into your ideas, they let you into their ideas and thought process. I think that's always the strongest way of collaborating. Trying to get to that point is hard. And it also requires, again, not just creativity, but many other skills around that. Active listening, I think, is super, super important. To just sit back and let people speak. Asking the right questions, like being able to ask the right questions. Interviewing techniques actually can help there as well, right? Like, you don't want to ask a closed question. You want to ask an open question that allows people to actually, contribite.
Let me write that down.
Yeah, it's like no yes or no questions, basically.
Yeah.
And always it's like, it's kind of like a blocker in that sense. So communication is a crazy important skill, and no one is perfect. I'm not perfect at it. I get impatient. I that's sort of like one of my key problems. I always want to do the work. I want to like get going. But patience is actually something that is also important. We're all on timelines. We're all on deadlines. We all have to get this trailer out the door. We have to finish this art. Devs have to finish the game or the next milestone or whatever it is. They maybe can't help you with the trailer right now because maybe the game isn't even in a capturable state yet. So what do we do then? Can we find ways to still show something? Lots of problem solving and I guess a healthy dose of optimism. Not to just like put your head in the sand. Grit, as they call it. Smart people. You gotta have grit.
Gotta have it. Yeah. And do you think being a good collaborator is something you were born with, or is that something that could be learned over time?
Absolutely not born with it. I think it's funny because I have two small boys, right? And my 5-year-old, he actually lets in his little brother to share toys, play. Not always, but the 2-year-old, he is like, oh, this is mine. This is mine. This is my toy. I'm here to play by myself. Leave me alone. I don't think we're born with it. I think we're born with self-preservation instincts and a hoarding mentality. Yeah. Just looking at my kids, right? So I don't think anybody's born with it. I think things like sports, all that stuff, when you're first exposed to it, like you have to pass the ball. That's collaboration. You have to pass the ball to the other player. We're talking about football in the European sense, or soccer, passing a ball. For any overseas listeners that are wondering what sport I'm talking about. But basketball, same thing. You can only take so many steps. You have to throw the ball at some point. I think collaboration is learned. Maybe some people have, are born with more empathy. I think there are some people are a bit more empathetic than others. They are more curious by nature. But collaboration is, especially in a professional environment, is something, there are some rules to that, like how this stuff works, letting people in, asking questions. One thing that I learned working for an American company, it's actually quite interesting, coming from Germany, having worked in Sweden, where collaboration is also quite different to German culture. And now working for an American company where a lot of things are said in American companies, but you still need to kind of like find your way to the actual issue problem, because Americans are very nice, very polite in written form. So I'm like, why are we writing this long, nice email? Why can't we just say this is the problem, this is how it,
Yeah,
so
get work done, like you said before, right? Yeah.
And it's so that's learned, and that's a lifelong process, I think, because very few of us are lucky enough to work for the same company or our own thing for all our lives. Usually we are nomads, right? We travel around, we work for different companies, and we have to relearn this as well, because culture plays a big role inside any company. So yes, collaboration is something that I don't think they teach it in the traditional sense at school or whatever. But maybe they should, because I think, when it comes down to communications and problem solving, it's an important skill, not just in games, but like in life, everything. Many people go to couples therapy because there's no collaboration between two parties. At the core principle of it is just talk, right?
Yeah, I think when I started thinking about putting this together and interviewing people in the sort of in creative fields, I guess you could say, I thought that maybe the answer is just communication, and then the podcast is over because we all know,
we're done.
But it's obviously not that simple.
No, it really isn't, and I think communication takes many shapes and forms. Especially in modern companies, you communicate remotely a lot. I think that can be a detriment sometimes. Everybody has been in big Zoom, Google, Teams calls, whatever. People have their camera off. Am I talking to myself here? What's going on? Are people actually paying attention?
Crickets, yeah.
Yeah, and the same with like Slack and just writing messages. Did I come off as too aggressive? Are people now thinking I'm an asshole for asking these questions? Or just like giving direction.
Yeah, just because you're German.
Yeah, but just because that's actually usually, my boss says this, like, don't mind Jerome, he's German, like, that's actually true.
He will tell you what he thinks.
I can be very direct, very German in that sense, because it's another thing, like when you work for an international environment, you have to unlearn certain things when it comes to communications that were totally fine when I worked for a German communications agency and my boss was yelling at me 2 times a day about something. That was totally normal. Like, it's almost like coming out of like maybe an abusive relationship and now understanding that, the world works differently, right?
Wow. The grass is greener.
Yeah. So it's definitely like you could talk forever about communication, and I don't think anyone has an answer to how it actually works because it's so individual. It really is. It depends on the person you talk to. And creatives, you can also generalize that a little bit. They are in love with their ideas, so you have to find a way to get in there and talk with them. And the same applies to just pure game dev as well, because you work with concept artists, you work with art directors, you work with technical artists, that actually VFX artists, like all these people have ideas, and they require direction from another creative, usually the game director. But then there's also budget. There's all these other things, right? Scope, time. You have a producer that comes in and is like, okay, we don't have the money for this. Like, what are you doing? This takes too long. Save it for the sequel, whatever it is,
Yeah. Great idea, but...
Yeah, great. Yeah, love it. So, yeah, I think communication in that sense can mean many things, but it also means learning to let go. Kill your darlings, as they say, over and over and over again. I know how companies like Supercell, which like prototype just like crazy, right? And kill things all the time. And I think you have to do the very same thing as an individual with your thoughts and ideas until you get to a point where it's like, okay, there's something here. And you do that through collaboration and communication. And just be unafraid to say things and to be honest. It's like, yeah, I'm not entirely sold on this. And then why is that? Honesty goes a long way as well.
Yeah, but you can't express it however you want.
No.
The first thing you think about,
yeah,
right?
It's not radical honesty. It's more like, okay, how do I package this to not hurt people's feelings? It's very important. I think especially creativity is, because it's in the word, right? It's something you created. You have an emotional attachment to your idea. People have an emotional attachment to their own style, what they wear. And if they get criticized for wearing shorts or whatever it is, they'll be offended, right? And it's the same with like ideas for a marketing campaign, ideas for an ad, ideas for just a post on a social media platform, right? And of course, especially when it's about a game, because that's like people often refer to that stuff as their baby, which I don't like because I have real children, and you know, it's a completely different thing to me. But I get why some people think that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what do you think is the right balance between like individual creativity and keeping the team alive around something?
That's a tough question. I think ultimately it comes down to compromise, but you can't always find that. Sometimes you have what you could call swim lanes or areas of responsibility, right? I think there was this guy called, he still exists. There is this guy, Michael Futter. He's a consultant. He wrote a book called the Game Dev Handbook, I believe, and he talks about Supergiant, the guys that made Hades, and Hades 2 now, and before that they have made Bastion and some other games. They're kind of like always iterating and, you know, creating better products. And I think he talked to them about how their teams operate and stuff. And I don't know who he talked to at the studio anymore, but this guy refers to the movie Sunshine. It sounds like I'm going on a big tangent here, but the movie Sunshine with Cillian Murphy, where they travel to the sun to reactivate it or something, and halfway there they see another spaceship floating, and they all start talking like, "What do we do? You know, we should board it. We should do this. We should do that. We should maybe ignore it and continue." Which, if you watch the movie, that would have been the best choice. But they're like, the guy goes, the only person here who can make a qualified decision is the pilot. So it comes down to also your own authority, skill set, background, right? The only person making the decision here is the pilot, because the pilot has to dock that fucking ship and has to make the call here, whether it works out with the fuel and all that stuff, right? So ultimately, there's creativity, there's collaboration, but there are also swim lanes. I'm not telling the game director to, I don't know, change how a character should, you know, access their inventory in the game, whatever it is. It's not a real example even. It's just something I'm
sure
making
it's
up.
happened.
It probably happened, yeah. But the finding a way there to say, okay, this is the place that I come from as an expert in the field. This is what I know about audiences. This is what I know about the current landscape, and not just games that are out, but also trailers that are coming out. You know, you start to see patterns. Things start to look the same. So maybe we shouldn't be doing this. You know, we can't make a Kojima style Death Stranding trailer for, I don't know, a game like Turok, because those are completely different titles, right? And when we did the TGA trailer for Turok, it was a Turok trailer. That was the purpose. It just came to be because we felt that this is the route to go. And then as marketers, that is where we have like the final say, so to speak. You still have to talk to the licensors and everybody else, but we make the call. We don't make the call on whether something should be green or blue in the game. And I think that is kind of like where your own ideas sometimes are the ones that win out, but you still have to go through the process of compromising, talking, and just come like, okay, but these are the guardrails. This is what we need to do in order for this trailer to hit, in order for this trailer to also be, you know, maybe accepted by partners. So for example, Hellraiser, which we just announced, there's a Red Band trailer, you know, that goes all out. It's on our website. There's also a Green Band trailer, because obviously, you know, we had to tone it down a little bit for YouTube to not, you know, go crazy, but also to our fellow partners that share this trailer on their profiles and so forth, because otherwise no one will see it, because no one will air it because it's too violent. So compromise there as well. But yeah.
All right, thanks. So can you walk us through a project where cross-disciplinary collaboration really worked, maybe between development and marketing?
Yeah, I think it's just in general terms for sure. I mean, just taking like recent examples, like our Hellraiser announced, that was a collaboration across many departments and game developers. Um, you start by just having the conversation, like what do we want to do here. Um, Game developers, of course, game directors, they want any game they make to have their moment in the sun, to get the spotlight, to help highlight the hard work that everybody is doing. So they also come from the same sort of space that marketing comes from, because yeah, we also want to do this for the reasons that we want wish lists, we want hype, we want platform holders and partners to be interested in the game, to be excited for it. So we all come from the same place, and understanding that is always the good entry level, right? And so with that in mind, collaborations that go really well, they always honor that. They align on what is this thing supposed to do? What is this trailer supposed to achieve? There are many different things trailers achieve throughout a marketing campaign. One is announcing a game's the hype, and then you have to be more educational down the line. You explain what the game is. You have to explain what the game is about, the story, all that good stuff. Those are for later, and require new conversations. But for something like a game announcement, that is the common place you start at. And then you start talking about what these people want to highlight, can highlight at this point in time. Because generally speaking, when you make a trailer, the game is still further out. If we were only making trailers with games that have already released, it would be super easy, because we can basically just open up Adobe Premiere and get going. But the collaboration starts there, like capabilities. What are we able to do? And are we taking time away from the development of the game? Can we? Should we? Most of the times the answer is no. So what do we do here in order to still make it happen? And when it works well, like it did in this case, it usually comes down to that understanding that the why. Like, why is something actually important and has to happen? You look at the trajectory of a product, and when it's supposed to release, you work back from there. You're like, okay, if we want to, release this game, whatever game it is, next year, then we better have a trailer now. So you kind of start planning accordingly. And with that sort of why and need, you start to get buy-in from, you start with the game director, everybody else involved, the producers, and you need artists on the game side to help you with the assets and everything else. You start capturing, so you involve a different team, like the creative team that makes trailers. They have to double check with the devs again, is everything correct? Before they even do that, they might need access to in-engine capturing tools. So sometimes they don't exist, so the game developers have to actually build that stuff. So without the why, you're completely lost. And it can happen on the flip side when it doesn't work well, is that the why isn't fully understood, because people are like, oh, but we still have so much time. Why would we do this now? And then you already sense the resistance. People don't really want to do it. Maybe there's a certain degree of fear, because again, game directors very precious about their ideas. Maybe feel like it's too early. The egg hasn't hatched yet. Like, why am I just like putting this out there now? So that's the opposite, right? When it doesn't work well. But when it works well, it's like the why is mutually understood by everybody, including the business, management, as well as the game developers. And you, in the work we do, we always bridge those gaps. We try to facilitate and problem solve across the board and try to find buy-in from everybody.
Okay. So we established that the why is the most important thing. Did you have any, for this specific project, Hellraiser, for example, do you have any like guiding principles or set of rules or something else to find the why? To
find the why. I mean, if we...
Or to communicate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If we start to like map it out, so to speak, from like there is a need to announce the product, right? The product has been in development. We kind of know where it's going. We know the trajectory of all. Let's sit down and let's talk about marketing, right? Like, let's talk about the sort of basic principles of what we're trying to do, and why it is important. Because it's not just about money. It's not just about selling X amount of copies. It's about awareness, making people actually aware that now, like, after a lot of hard work, this product exists, because it can also serve as an internal motivator at the studio for the people that do all the hard work to see their work out there and have people react it to. So you start to think about sort of emotional triggers that work for people. Everybody has their own motivation why they do things. There's also a lot of people, especially when you work in the Swedish industry, that are like, I don't care. I don't care what people think. I just want to do my thing. I just want to like create like a character or whatever. That sometimes is the Swedish mindset of like, you know, I don't want to be seen. I just want to do my thing. And those motivations exist, but a lot of people actually like to have their work out there and looked at, and seeing the feedback and the reactions. You got to be protective of that too, because sometimes, you know, people are assholes out there. So when you report, you focus on the good stuff. You keep the bad stuff to yourself. But ultimately, you start with those emotional, like what works for people, like what would they like to see, getting their studio out there, getting their individual contributions out there, and being able to talk about it. I think the video game industry is very secretive. I mean, until we announced Hellraiser, we weren't talking about Hellraiser.
Good job.
That worked out. Yeah, I mean, I was like, this is always the nightmare, right? Like leaks. I hate leaks. I'm always very saddened, even if it happens to some other company, because I enjoy announces more so than releases. I hate game releases. I hate releasing a game, but that's a different story. I do like announcing games, and I want everybody to enjoy this and have that same feeling of joy. So you start with that. The joy you feel when you get something out is actually a good trigger for people to start the work and to help. And you also phrase it like that. Hey, we need your help. Can you help? You don't say we want to do this. Can you get this done? You know, it's again like one of those little communication tricks, I would say. So you carefully start mapping that out, that why. That is the starting point. And then once you have that, you keep people involved, updated. You share the drafts. You share the recent developments. You share the feedback. Not with everyone, not widely, because again, you can get in like a too many cooks situation where things get muddied and difficult. You still have to honor swim lanes. You have to bring your expertise to the table. But you still have to share. You know, not just by necessity with the CEO who will have thoughts, or the game director who will have thoughts, but also other people, community. They kind of need to know where this is going, understand the project better. And from then on, you start sharing out the drafts and new developments, and maybe you invite the dev team to do the same, because sometimes, you know, things happen. You know, a game can maybe pivot a little bit, or things can change, and then all of a sudden you're on the wrong track here. So you need to have that established line of communication. Again, yeah, we keep referring back to communication, but it's really that, right? The regular interactions, setting up, for lack of a better word, and it sounds boring, but processes to do that. Like, you know, at Saber we do like check-ins for all the projects, like every 2 weeks with the dev team, so we get an idea of where the project is in terms of the production timeline and everything. And this is also an opportunity for people to ask marketing questions, like about like, hey, where are we at with the trailer? Have you worked on the logo yet? That can be something we do for some projects. For some projects, actually the devs that have an idea for a logo, and then we just take that, give feedback. So, you know, kind of try to give and take as well, not just do everything ourselves. It's also nice if other people do the work for you, to be honest.
Yeah, it's also a bit inclusive, and maybe helps people to get into the why again?
Yeah, I think that's important what you just mentioned, inclusivity. Like, that is a good process. That is like when a collaboration works well. The why, communication, inclusivity, don't shit on anyone's idea, but also be able to invite other thoughts and try to understand where people come from. I think more often than not, we try to like be too protective of things. And that applies to everybody. And to just be able to turn that off and just sit back and listen and, maybe not even answer right now. Maybe just take a walk, think about it, or, don't reply to every DM on Slack or whatever, but just think about it, and just give everybody time to think. I think we're trying to push off too often. We try to push too fast for answers, and, creatives change their minds. And they're like, oh yeah, I said this, but actually I didn't mean it, So like, double check with people.
Yeah, but that's also, it must be an interesting balance as well, because we balance then between inclusivity and keeping in the swim lanes, as you said.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I do think so, and it's also talk about communication, inclusivity, creativity, and all these things, but education as well. Trying to make sure people actually understand what the job is that you have. I think more often than not, when you talk to developers, because marketing, also sometimes for good reason has a bad rap out there. So when you look at like the trust indexes out there for industries in general, I think Edelman, they release the Edelman Trust Index every year. And advertising, marketing is always like way, way down there. People don't really trust ads, marketers, all that stuff. Teachers always like number 1 or 2. And then there's everything in between. But I do believe we have a responsibility within our jobs, our fields, to also educate people on what we do. Whether that's like a data scientist I talk to, he has to tell me or she has to tell me what their job is and why they try to get my KPIs here or my YouTube views or whatever. Then I'd like to know why do you need that?
The why.
Yeah. Again, the why. Yeah. But also like education throughout a company is really important, so that when I talk to a developer or a game director, that they also understand that I don't come from like a bad place or I want to misrepresent the product. But I actually really want to make sure that what they're making is given sort of the best possible chance to stand out in the spotlight. We keep seeing these numbers of like 15,000 games per year release or whatever. And many of them we will never ever hear about because they don't have the marketing support or the visibility support. And some are lucky, they have, they just take off and it's like one developer made this, and sold 5 million
Keep
copies.
the dream alive.
Yeah, the dream is kept alive by those stories that people kind of latch onto. The reality of it is without marketing and without sort of that support, sometimes even without publishing support, you will have a hard time, a harder time. It's not impossible, but it's definitely more difficult. So I think when it comes down to that, collaboration, inclusivity, education is also another one. You just have to let people in, be transparent. I think don't try to hide your intentions. Don't try to just get something out of the other person without telling them why you need this. Create context for decision making, which is actually what transparency means, like establishing a context for decision making. It doesn't always mean saying everything, because even like when you work with games and you have to delay something or whatever, you're not like writing to on Twitter or wherever it is like, we're delaying this game because I don't know, the release manager or whatever pressed the wrong button. We have decided to delay the game to give it more time, whatever, like just create some context for decision making. And I think that works internally as well. Just bring people along for the whole journey all the time.
It's like help me help you.
Yeah, let me help.
Jerry Maguire or whatever. Just like here's what you need to know, and I also need to know each other's roles in this, or
Yeah,
to
exactly.
find the why.
And don't assume bad intentions. I think in general we all have a job to do. We all come from a good place ultimately. I like to think so, at least. Um, there are bad apples everywhere, but you shouldn't walk around the world in general and assume bad intent. I think most people try to do a good job and be good and have a good time as well. Like, people don't underestimate the fun part either.
No.
It is awesome to work with video games. It is awesome to collaborate with these creative people. It's just fun. Like, I don't work with accounting or taxes or insurance. I work with video games. It's a privilege, and the same applies to everybody working in this industry. And I think that's also easy to forget sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. So this might be a good segue into, when do you think commercial voices should be involved in the creative process of making a game, and not the traditional creative roles? But
yeah, I think that is ultimately whether you have a publisher or not. And just talking specifically about games. If you don't have a publisher, then you have to be that voice as well, because ultimately, games cost money to make. They cost resources. They cost time, a lot of time. So ultimately, the commercial side of things also means creating limitations for yourself on the creative side, but also finding the right way to get what it is you're making out, if your intent is to be a quote-unquote successful developer. You have to find out for yourself what enough means, what's your baseline. Like, I think that the thing with, like, good authors of books, good creatives in general, musicians, whatever, the number one goal can't be, I want to be rich, right? So talking about commercial needs, the number one objective should be, I have something burning inside of me that I want to share with the world as I create this thing. And by sharing with the world, I mean, like, maybe you just do it for yourself and your kid who will play your game. Maybe there is an audience for it, but you have to come from, like, it has to come from the inside, has to be intrinsic. But then, working in this industry, as we call it, it is an industry. Industry means, it implies that there's money to be made, that there are commercial needs. You have to, learn to think that way to an extent. And even if you are yourself as a game director or game creator, maybe, for lack of a better word, ignorant to these commercial aspects, you need to let people in that will remind you and tell you, like, be that a producer, hey, you have X amount of time because you have X amount of money, can't go over budget. This is what you need to do, and this is what you can't do, or save it for the sequel. Like, coming from a place of optimism that there will be one. You never know.
It will be, or might be, if you make money.
If you make money, again, yeah, like, if people like it, right? And you can't force people to like anything. But then again, our job on the brand and marketing side, whatever game it is to really portray it in the best way possible. It doesn't mean lying to the audiences at all. It just means we take what you have, we try to get the essence of your idea, and we share it with the world in a way that makes it look the way you intended. Because most of the time, again, when you do that, the game is unfinished. So you kind of have to also find a way to do that, which is why a lot of trailers these days often include CG, right? A game intro or whatever it is, like a CG sequence, because the rest isn't there yet. So you try to do that. Just be aware of the commercial side of things, in that sense that, at the end of the day, especially if you run a studio, then there's a lot of livelihoods, at stake, ultimately. You have a lot of people employed. They all work for you because they're passionate about the thing you're doing. Be mindful of not disappointing them in that sense, right? So I actually think as boring as I find accounting and finances and all that stuff myself, it is actually crucial, and it gives you the guardrails to actually be creative within those limitations. Um, so yeah, commercial needs matter. Building a community matters. That is also something that you do more on the marketing side than as a game developer. There are some that do both, that interact with the community from when they start concepting, and we've seen that that can also work really well. Stories of early access and all that stuff can work out really, really well. But it's not always guaranteed. You need to find the spark, and in order to be commercially successful, you need to create something that resonates with people.
Sure.
So find ways. Like I think when people are like, Kojima is so weird. He does all this weird stuff in Death Stranding or whatever. Like all these weird cutscenes and stuff. It still resonates with people on some level. Either they think it's funny, it's hilarious, or they like the quirkiness of it, or they just appreciate it for what it is, which is like a beautiful story told in a weird way that you don't see every time because it's just blockbusters and Marvel these days, right? So it's something else, and people yearn for new something else, something that already exists but repackaged differently. When people talk about directors like Quentin Tarantino, like, oh, he's a genius. Well, sure, but he's also like just a really good thief because he grew up like basically with movies. He worked in a video store. He watched every movie possible, and he created his own style based on knowledge, and that became commercially really viable and successful. Like every movie he's made, I believe, has been commercially somewhat successful. Maybe the Grindhouse and Death Proof was like a little bit out there, but
for good reasons.
Yeah, but the other things, have been working really well for him. But yeah, and it's not our job in marketing to say, hey, this would make more money if you did this, like your game, right? It's not our job to change what the game is. That's more for like creative directors, all that stuff to decide. Data scientists to look at like player behavior and all that stuff. We do that to an extent as well, but we don't come in and say, hey, this game should actually do this instead of that. What we are trying to do is to say, okay, in order for this to stand out, let's focus on these different things, because we know that this kind of stuff resonates with an audience right now, or with that particular audience for your game. Like the Mud Runner series is interesting because it is commercially super successful. It's selling like crazy across the board. And it's a game where you drive a truck through just the hills, the mud, the dirt, and it's really slow, but it has a crazy big audience. So why is that? Try to understand that, and then you know it's commercially viable, and just try to completely own that niche, which is what Saber does with the Mud Runner series, and just iterate on that and build on that. But they've struck gold in that sense. And whether that was originally the plan or not, I don't think so. It was just because some guy thought it was cool to make a game where you drive a Jeep through the mud, right?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people sit at home, watch Ice Road Truckers, and the dream. Yeah. I mean, I'm guessing now, but just dream about,
It's true.
But maybe don't want to do that in real life. So.
Yeah, and there's like, I mean, survival games are like that too, right? Like, sometimes you wonder why people just get lost in these survival games like Valheim or Minecraft even, and just build shit for hours. And then you realize, there's a whole world, real world, where people do this stuff and watch YouTube videos and all the stuff about people building their own cottage in the woods, So
yeah,
there's an audience for everything.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those, and they're surprisingly addictive. It's like, I'm gonna see this guy finish this mud hut or whatever, and then just like, or chop up like 1 million pieces of wood or sticks and put them together, and it's just wow. Yeah. They build like palaces essentially.
Yeah. So like in terms of commercial viability, whatever it is, there is an audience for everything. I think it's then it's called a business question, which is not mine to answer always. It's like, okay, how big is that audience? Again, that's when you really go into the money side of things. Addressable audience, core audience, all that stuff, and you're like, okay, this is 100,000 people. that are for sure interested in your game if it ends up being good. So minimum 100,000 sales, whatever. You can never guarantee it, but you can make estimates, right? And there's your addressable audience, people that through marketing, through all these things, you can reel in and make interested in your game. And it's like maybe 500,000, you know, I'm just base numbers here, but that's how you kind of establish a commercial baseline for something. And then you say, okay, given that this is the number, this is the amount of money you can spend on your game and making it and all that stuff. So there's a commercial reality that always exists.
Yeah. But I mean, obviously, departments or people such as you and yours have an ear to the ground that you know the traditional creative or developer might not have, or maybe shouldn't have even. So maybe the sooner you feed back that in, the higher the chance of making something.
Exactly,
successful.
Because what we want them to do ultimately is make the game in peace, so to speak, right? Like be able to deliver on their vision. And create something that ultimately will do well. And the fewer distractions we create for them, the better. So
yeah, providing silent feedback almost.
Yeah, like you know, just repackage it in different ways, or you know, I think many companies work with milestone reviews and all that stuff. So you give people a lot of time to work on things, deliver a milestone, you get feedback on that milestone, and then you go back and you work another however many months until you deliver the next milestone. And I think overall that process works because many companies are doing it that way. And it's probably just to allow for minimum distractions during game development as well.
Yeah. So speaking of things like that, are there any tools, workflows, or structures, processes that you have been part of, or that you sort of apply today that you think are successful in sort of helping out the creative collaboration part?
Yeah, I think especially, you know, the world we live in being so remote, and Saber is also a particularly special case because we are fully remote as a company, except for the studios, you know, in different locations, but as publishing, we are fully remote. So I'm the only employee in Sweden, for example, whereas the rest of my team, they are based in the States with one person, community manager in Portugal. But, you know, it's like all over the place. So you kind of have to find a good way to work across time zones with developers, but also your own team, and stay in touch. So a good example for, like, you know, there are really good video editing tools that are collaborative. There are, you know, interactive docs and all that stuff that you can use. But it comes down to really good and solid documentation. So, you know, you can't just talk about things in isolation. It has to be somewhere. Like every meeting, everything has to be documented somehow. Because when you meet in person with your core group of developers and you have a studio in Stockholm here, everybody's there, it's much easier to keep the information flow going. To an extent, you still need to find ways to share. Regular touch points are good. We do bi-weekly meetings with the development teams. We do monthly meetings that are like more business centered. Just regular processes and touch points there. On the flip side, when it comes to my own team, I hate micromanaging. So it's more like, you know, find ways to regularly interact with your team members, be that weekly, and just check in. Let them share their work when they feel ready. And when they feel ready, it better be ready, right? It's not just be like draft 0.5, but just give me something that I can actually feedback on. But find a groove that works. I think every studio does it differently. There might be, you know, with sprints and agile and all that stuff, way different workflows on the development side that work for the individual studios. For the sort of creative marketing side of things, we just always have to make sure that there is a deadline, timeline, you know, that we work towards. And somebody, and that's usually my job, has to make sure that we also hit that deadline. So we work across all these projects and have processes in place for that, which more often than not is just regular meetings and check-ins. Very loose in that sense. And I believe people will give you very different answers when it comes to this stuff. Some are more like, oh, we need like mural boards and all that stuff, and we need to, have morning stand-ups where we look at everything. And we've done that on the marketing side as well at a different company, where every morning we got together to talk about what's gonna go down during the day, mostly closer to a release when things got really busy. At Saber, we have so many releases, and there's so much happening all the time that we can't do that. We would just, be talking for hours about everything every day. And so we do these things every 2 weeks. We go through the entire slate of projects. You need good timekeepers in terms of timelines. Like, hey, we can't do it that day because that day we're already doing something for this game. Good example was actually the Hellraiser announced. Like, we had the teasers, but we also had other things that were happening, like on World War Z that we wanted to announce. So how do we kind of find the balance that we don't cannibalize on something? So find good ways to make sure people know what's going on. Again, like information sharing, education, transparency across the board. So no one feels like they miss out on something, or they, even unintentionally make the mistake of talking about something when they weren't supposed to because no one's there to hear it.
Yeah. Again, good job on the latest thing.
Thank you.
I had no idea. I was very happy to see someone's doing something with that IP, of course. So we're sort of running out of time. I could sit here all day and talk to you or listen to you, actually, which is mostly what I'm doing, and I'm happy about that too. You have lots of a lot of experience to share, so it's been super interesting. But it's like a final question for you: who would you love to see on the show? Someone else. I can't guarantee anything, of course. But.
There are quite a few people that I think will be great candidates to sit down and talk about different creative sides of things. There's also a few sort of gaming adjacent companies like that have been doing great work in the past that can probably speak to creativity really well. Like maybe Sam Niskanen from Lurkit, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Then like I've worked with great people, great creatives. A guy that I really like that I work with on the regular, interact with on the regular as well, David Valjallo. He's a creative portfolio director at CI Games. Good guy. Should talk to him about some of this stuff. We actually probably align on some of the things because we've worked together so much.
Yeah.
But a great guy to learn from as well. So yeah, I mean, the list, but I could probably send you a whole list.
Sure,
of people,
yeah.
So that will be like,
But I know Sam, so I'll reach out to him and absolutely say that you.
Because sometimes it's interesting to also hear people from the outside looking in and talking about these things. And on the flip side, quite a few game directors, I think, that will be interesting to talk to, like the folks at Fatshark, for example, will probably be keen to share some of their insights and knowledge that they've gained over the decades, so for sure, yeah. Producers, it's probably a few good people to talk to that are always in the thick of it, and have to try and manage all of this stuff.
The least creative.
Yeah, the least creative in a way, but also dealing with all this, taking all this creativity in and trying to make sense of it all, right? Yeah. That's also an interesting one.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you so much.